Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello there. Do you remember the times when the grandparents or parents used to tell stories? We used to get lost in those stories and imagine ourselves as kings and queens of those stories. When the wolf used to come at the door and used to say, open the door in the voice of grandmother, and the boy goes to the door and sees the feet of the wolf and from the behind of the door and later hunts it down. Those moments when we used to get scared or we laughed on the jokes which were made by our grandparents. Today, with me, my grandparents are no more, but their stories are. From time immemorial, humans have tried to capture or preserve what they have seen so that it can be told later. When tools were unknown, when there was no medium, they carved markings on cave walls, carved images out of stones and later with metal. Whatever means were available, when there were paints, canvas, so whatever means were available, we tried to satiate our hunger to tell the stories. So technically, telling stories started even before we started using language. Stories have no boundaries. They flow like wind and migrate like birds. They have no country. Well, you must be wondering why I am being so nostalgic or talking so philosophically. In this 12th video in the series, which is the 12th video in the series, I would like to welcome you in the world of stories, where we will understand the threads of this blanket named stories and how they surround us, the warmth, the comfort we felt by being a child. Let's be that child once more. This particular video is completely devoted to writing, especially the fiction writing. In this video, we will learn about what is a story, what is a plot, the relationship between story and a plot, what is motivation and what is conflict. If there is a motivation, there is a conflict, and if there is a conflict, there is a motivation. Now, why do we need to have these elements in a story? Now, in the next video, which is after this, I will talk about documentaries, the history of documentary, what is the format of documentary, different types of documentaries, and many important aspects. I'll be also talking about a documentary proposal, which is very important at student level. While explaining about the documentary in the next video, I will talk about expository documentary. There I will tell you about one documentary which was made by John Burgess. The name of the documentary was Ways of Seeing. It was made in 1974. This documentary was later on turned into a book. This is that book. And it's a must kind of a book, must have kind of a book. This book opens with a very simple line, but that's a punch. The statement with which this book's open is very small, but very powerful. I read out the first paragraph from this book, and I'll tell you later why this particular thing is important when we are talking about stories. It says, "Seeing comes before words. The child looks and recognizes before it can speak." But there is also another sense in which seeing comes before words. It is seeing which establishes our place in the surrounding world. We explain that world with words, but words can never undo the fact that we are surrounded by it. We explain the world with words, but the words cannot undo the fact that we are surrounded by it. The relationship between what we see and what we know is never settled. What we see and what we know is never settled, and this gives birth to the stories. What we see and what we know is never settled, and this gives birth to the stories. We never look at just one thing. We always look at things in relation between two things and ourselves. Our vision is continuously active, continually moving, continually holding things in a circle around itself, constituting what is present to us as we are. Soon after we see, we are also aware of the fact that we can also be seen. The eye of the other combines with our own eye to make it fully credible that we are the part of this visible world, and this gives birth to the storytelling tradition. Now, as I'm talking about so much about stories, story, so I'll explain it further. Now, you and I see, witness at least thousands of color or few hundred colors every day. Now, if you know about colors, there are 3 primary colors, there are 3 secondary colors, and there are 6 tertiary colors. Now, when you add or you minuses black and white with these paints, you can have every other color imaginable, and I mean, with these colors you can have any sort of color. In the same way, we only have few stories in the world. Only the style of these stories changes, and they all feel like new to us. I give you some examples to explain what I am saying. I have been watching a lot of new films also, but I really like many old films. So if you have seen a film called Ram and Shyam, which was released in 1967, another film called Sita or Geeta, which was released in 1972, Chalbaz in 1989, and Kishan Kanhaiya in 1990. When you see all of these films together, they are different films obviously, but interestingly based on the same story. Now, would not you say the film Billu Babar, which was later named as Billu only, which was released in 2009, is a story of Krishna and Sudama. Krish, which was released in 2006, will not you say that it is the story of Krishna and Kans? Now, there was a beautiful film called Swami, which was released in 1977, which was directed by
Basu Chatterjee.
and a very popular film Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, which was directed by Sanjay Leela Bhansali. If you see these two films together, you will be amazed to know that they are the same story. In Swami, Saudamani's marriage to Ghanshyam is thrown into internal turmoil when her ex-lover Narinder comes to visit her, hoping of reviving their romance. In Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, slightly the story is slightly changed because in 1977 that was possible, and when the Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam was released, so the sensibility also changed with the passage of time. Many films like Devdas, P.C. Barua made it, Bimal Roy made it, Sanjay Leela Bhansali made it, Dave D, which was released in 2009, was made by Anurag Kashyap. Again, base was the base was Devdas only, and this film, the Devdas, has been adapted on screen more than 20 times. So story-wise, all these films, 20 films, are same. Now, stories were and are the building blocks of our civilization, and cinema uses stories. Stories are and have been and always will be an absolutely essential part of human culture. Stories are how we learn about each other, our past, and our culture. Whether they are created for entertainment or they are created to recount a real life event, stories are literally being lived, told, and created every second of every day. A story is a succession of events that invigorates the climax and it initiates the immutable change. A story or narrative is connected series of events told through words. Those words can be written, those words can be spoken. Imagery that can be still, that can be moving, a powerful photograph or a good short film and things like that. You can say it through body language, performance, music, or any other form of communication. You can tell story about anything, and the event described can be real or imaginary, covering both fiction and non-fiction, and leaving no topic, no genre or style untouched. Well, you can tell any story in any manner or in any style. It can be a short story, it can be a medium length story, it can be a very long story, or you can write a novel out of it if you want, or you can write a screenplay out of it if you want. There are times when you can say a story in just one line, like suppose if I say that Akash met the love of his life and lived happily until the day she died. Akash met the love of his life and lived happily until the day she died. It's just one line. It is just one line, not more than one line. Or it could be slightly elaborate further. You can elaborate it slightly further. Like, for example, when Akash was 22 years of age, he met the love of his life. It was his last day of college, and there is where he saw her. He knew she is the one, and the girl also knew it too. After graduation, Akash and that girl ran away together and went through many situations. Finally, they were accepted by their families and they lived together happily for the rest of their days. Now, earlier it was only one line. In the same line was slightly stretched, and though there was one line, and here it is just slightly bigger, but still technically a very tiny story, but slightly bigger as compared to the first one. We can tell it in all kinds of ways and of all different lengths. That could be a story, I mean, what I just said, the example, that could be a story of the film Socha Na Tha, Abhay Deol's first film, or that can be an offshoot of Dil Chahta Hai's character Akash also. After all, the couple lived an entire lifetime together. There would be countless events that together make up the story of their life. By the way, that can be a case with the second part of the
Tanu weds Manu.
because when they got married and started living happily ever after, what happens after marriage, that is what is being shown in the second part.
Tanu weds Manu.
So one line, one slightly stretched, and the references of three different films. There can be many thousand films, trust me, if we start finding out. The range of type of stories is pretty much endless. For that reason, the stories have been divided into very broad categories like fiction and non-fiction. We are covering fiction in this video, and we will cover non-fiction in the next coming video. What is a fiction? Basically, fiction is or fictional stories are basically based on made up or imaginary kind of events. They can be, so many types of fictional stories and genres, including but not limited to fairy tales, folklores. You can have science fiction, love story in space, mythology. There can be horror stories, there can be bedtime stories, historical fiction can be there can be fantasy, some film about some legends, epic stories, dramas, political thriller, adventure stories. So there can be so many categories. Now, when we talk about in terms of fiction, you will understand in terms of, when we talk about in terms of non-fiction, the next video is entirely about non-fiction or documentary. Non-fiction stories can cover any kind of real life event or experience, including but not limited to historical events, some historical event about some crime or about some justice, the story, about wartime stories, news and current events, travel stories, cultural history, biography and autobiographies, survivor stories, and many more. Now, traditionally, stories were passed on from generation to generation by storytellers. Someone whose job was to share the stories which actually helped us make sense of the world. Today we receive stories from different sources, like different types of screen also. When you explore your internet, you see through your phone or in your laptop or from television screen or digital screen, film screen, tablet or any mobile device, etc. Film and television storytellers need a language through which they can articulate their stories. Traditionally, there used to be spoken words or songs. At the end of the 19th century, the kinetograph camera, the moving camera, was invented as a tool that could be used to tell stories through moving images. The earlier films tend to lack a story structure, instead just capturing movements, but as the medium became more popular filmmakers developed a film language or a set of grammar rules for how to tell a story on films. Now, when I say film grammar, we use grammar when we write something. Now, every sentence that we write has got grammar. If I am speaking, I have to be grammatically correct also. So, we use grammar when we write something. Every sentence has a structure, and in film, this structure is equivalent to different types of shots that we discussed in our video 6 and 7. Different camera movements can be like noun, adjective, verbs and adverbs. Lighting will be like compound words. Sound will be like antonyms and synonyms, which we have discussed about sound in video 8. Editing will be like contractions. They are the tools that filmmakers use to tell stories on screen, shot by shot and scene by scene. So far that was about story. Now let's discuss about plot. What is a plot? Plot is a series of events that takes place in a story. It's a series of events that takes place in a story. Not all stories begin at one point in time and continue forward through time to a conclusion at a later date. To understand the basis of a plot, one need to understand the clear idea about the linear plot outline. A linear plot outline consists of the following things. The exposition provides the background information which one must be aware in order to understand or receive full information or benefit of the story. The initial incident is the incident that first begins the conflict, rising action, the series of events and crises that leads up to the climax. Crisis, an individual event within the rising action that creates tension and pushes the conflict towards a resolution at the climax. Now, what is a climax? Climax is the highest point of interest at which the audience learns about the outcome of the conflict. Denouement. It is a wrapping up of the loose ends. The unanswered questions about the character's life or subplot in the story may be answered here. So these were the elements of linear plot outline. Now, the narrative is much more than simply telling a story, but in terms of filmic narrative, meaning starts to be generated when plot is established. In a film, it is possible to start within an overarching story, but the plot has to follow quickly in order for things to make sense. This is essential because plot is about causality, how one event or action leads to another. If it is not explained exactly, then the film makes no sense at all. As E.M. Foster said, "The king died and then the queen died is a story, but if the king died and then the queen died of grief is a plot." If it is not established by a filmmaker soon enough, then the audience will try to establish it by themselves. Now, let's try to understand what is conflict and motivation. Now, conflict arises from the difficulties the protagonist encounters when trying to achieve his or her goal or its goal. It is essential, and there is a need to understand the use of conflict as the source of dramatic energy, and the motivation is how this dramatic energy what we will do with this dramatic energy. Now let's talk about motivation. There are two types of motivation: internal motivation and external motivation. Typically, the hero's inner motivation springs from his mental life, his value, needs, background, etc. These elements in turn guide the physical action that arises in response to some outer challenge or opportunities. In other words, his outer motivation. Importantly, it is the outer goal that first catches our audience attention. Any inner persuasion lies beneath the surface of the tale and is revealed as the story progresses. The outer motivation then is the initial cause that starts the hero down to a certain path. Inner motivation, however, is important because it helps to keep the hero's physical action to that path. Together, outer and inner motivation forms an integrated unit and gives an explanation to the event-driven action and its justification. Now, let's talk about conflict. Again, the conflict is of two types: internal conflict and external conflict, and the combination of both. Whenever there is a difference in characters and similarity of goals, conflict arises. As long as the character agrees to the same point, there cannot be any conflict. The plurality of opinion actually gives birth to conflict. There is a simple formula to generate conflict. Give your protagonist and antagonist the same goal. As they will try to achieve the goal, the conflict is bound to happen. To have more drama in your script, you need to have this conflict. Like, for example, in Devar, which was released in 1975, two brothers, Vijay and Ravi, the conflict is there. One is with system, another is against the system. Or the love triangle in Devar, Bazigar, Dhadkan, or Bahubali, both protagonist and antagonist loving the same girl. There can be many more types of conflict. They can be behavioral, socially or traditionally conflicting type of ideas. Like, the behavioral conflict will be miser versus spendthrift, calm versus angry, cheerful versus sad. Socially conflicting conflict will be rich versus poor, young versus old, or one community versus another community. Traditionally, science and superstition they are opposite ideas. Materialistic versus spiritualistic, they are different ideas. Therefore, that's why the conflict can happen between violent and non-violent person. The other forms of conflict, and these are motivation also. Like, if there is a love conflict, there can be a love motivation also. If there is a moral conflict, there can be a moral motivation also. If there is a sexual conflict, there can be a sexual motivation also. If religious conflict is there, there can be a religious motivation also. Political conflict, political motivation. Self-image conflict, self-image motivation. Interpersonal conflict, interpersonal motivation. So there can be so many things. After motivation and conflict, let's see how the beginning till end a film can be structured. It is not a set pattern, but just a suggestion. You can start your film from anywhere you like. It can be a linear story or a non-linear one. Whatever your style is, the ultimate aim is to impress the audience. As you know that each film has a beginning, middle, and an end, I will explain about it in this video also. You have been watching films for a long time. When a film starts, you expect certain kind of things in the beginning, and the film advances to the game of cat and mouse chase, and you start anticipating what is going to happen next. The common pattern of this expectation reflects in the form of why and how. Like, an audience can ask why it matters to me. The moment a screenplay is able to arise this question in audience, the film becomes self-explanatory and the audience is super excited to know how it will be explained or how it will work. If you reverse the situation where the subject is known to the audience, now the audience becomes even more excited in knowing how it will be working. It is a barometer of audience expectation and a graph for your explanation. Acts, plot points, and turning points are some of the screenplay writing devices through which we advance our story. As I said, a story is a succession of events that invigorates the climax and it initiates the immutable change. So far, what I have just said, one thing is clear, that when you watch a film, you are actually watching a series of events put in a structured form to arouse a specific kind of emotion, a specific kind of emotional response in audience. And it also says that invigorates the climax. It means that this series of events that you have been watching will reach up to the level of a high point, and it will bring an immutable change, which means a permanent change in your protagonist. It also means that a kind of a person your character has been in the beginning of the film, by the time you reach the climax, the protagonist will not remain the same. It also means that if the film starts with some scene from the climax, the scene which is actually the part of the climax, a device like this makes the film a non-linear film. And in this structure, suppose your character is taking the decision instantaneously in this climax scene, you should already understand the point that this character has actually never taken any decision of his own in his entire life. To make my point more clear, I'm sure that all of you must have seen Three Idiots, which was released in 2019, a blockbuster. If you have seen that film, how it starts? It starts that Farhan is in the plane and it is about to take off. He receives a call and he fakes his illness. On his way to hospital, he runs from there and picks up a driver of Joginder Dhillon and goes to Vasant Vihar and picks up Raju and meets Silencer in the campus. Now think it for a moment what Farhan is doing. Well, he is planning. He is doing it all well, and he is taking the decisions quickly. Now look at the Raju. He is rich, Silencer is successful, and Rancho is projected someone of no importance. Now, if this is the part from the climax, it means that in the linear story, all of them will exactly be the opposite. So let's look at two. In linear story, Farhan has never taken a single decision in his life. All about him is decided by his father, and he has been carrying a letter which he has written to a photographer for a long time. Now, as we see Raju in the first time in the opening scene of the film in non-linear manner, Raju is confident, rich and successful, whereas throughout the film he is shaky, poor and a scared person. In the beginning of the film, Silencer is in commanding position and confident about his life, whereas throughout the film he is shown as a timid person and never happy about his situation. The position of Rancho as he is introduced in the beginning of the film is not very high, but throughout the film he rules. It is not about something that someone is poor or someone is rich, so it is not about rich and poor. It's about the kind of state you are in the beginning of the film, and you will exactly be opposite of that in the end of the film. Now, let's discuss how films are structured in a linear manner. When a film starts, you get to feel the time, the style, the tone of the film which is set for next 2 hours. It is an imagine how it will change. It is a phase where all the logics and beliefs are made. It is where you are brought in a new world of believability. As soon as we observe the time, style and the tone of the film, we are introduced to different characters like brother, sister, father, mother, and the things which is missing from their life. There is something missing in character or character's life, or if it is not missing in protagonist's life, then the problem or the opportunity is presented to him or her immediately, and it has also been given the scope that this problem will be solved in near future also. A kind of a roadmap is proposed here along with some other options also. The overall characteristics up till this point is fully established either through action, appearance or through dialogues. It's like either you do it or someone else will do it on your behalf. There are many films where the character introduces himself or herself, and there are times when, before the entry of the protagonist, people talk about him or her, how he or she is, and how he or she will look like is fully established in the mind before he or she enters in the film. In the beginning only, the character is presented with the opportunity to go on a voyage. It may or may not be literally, but definitely a different kind of a world that the character has been living in. Whether you thought about it or never thought about it, the protagonist always have had it in him or her. If he or she is aware, it's fine. Otherwise, you will be given a mentor who will guide you or train you throughout this journey or for this journey. Now, all the debates about whether you thought about it or not, all this is settled down when a clear-cut incident or opportunity comes in your way. The story that you have been watching for last few minutes, the world that you have been witnessing is about to be changed. Yes, literally. There is always a reason, things or incident which gives a reason or forces to the protagonist to take the new path. Now, this is the end, this is the stage where the act 1 gets over. The act 1 may last for 20-30 pages, or 20-30 minutes, both are fine. I'm very sure that many of you must have seen Bahubali, the beginning, which was released in 2015. And you also remember how a small boy, Mahendra Bahubali, is raised by a tribe. The leader of the tribe is his family, and he, since his childhood, has been asking his parents to go up to the mountain. He is being denied again and again till the day when he finds a wooden mask and makes an image out of it, and he rushes towards mountain and reaches a higher place where he sees the love of his life on the opposite side of the mountain, and he takes the leap of faith and crosses the mountain and reaches on to the other side. Technically, it is the starting of Act 2, or we can say the love story. So you technically find a reason to start your journey and find your love interest also. I have given you an example of Bahubali. The same thing happens in DDLJ also. Raj met Simran on the way when they were going to Europe trip. Not only has the film shifted to a new location, but to a new place also. Now, what happens when a boy meets a girl? Well, it is a leisure time, happy time, and you let it roll and just want to enjoy this phase of the film. The love story has started, the strongest part of our Indian film industry. All of us love this part of the film. It's good melody with all the chiffon saris and all the mountains. As this part starts getting over, we slowly move towards the midpoint, or India it is also called the interval. What happens when we are approached, or when we are approaching an intermission or interval? Well, if it is a romantic film like DDLJ, Raj and Simran will part and they will realize that they are madly in love with each other. And if it is a horror film, you know what is coming. But if it is an action film, the intermission will be at the crescendo point. All is not well when the statue of Bhallal Dev is being established towards the midpoint of the film. Because of the domino effect, the statue starts falling. Mahendra Bahubali holds it, and the name Bahubali echoes in the air. And when the statue of Bhallal Dev is established, the image of Mahendra Bahubali is superimposed on it. It is a perfect midpoint. It is for this part that many of us buy the first day, first show ticket, or now just want to finish all the OTT episodes in one go. Well, you can argue that, Salim sir, it is a format which is applicable or workable only for 120 minutes film, or we can say a 2 hours film. Can it be used for 8 to 10 episode or 7 to 8 hours of a web series? Well, the answer is yet. Well, the answer is yes, but it's not that simple. A 2-hour structure cannot work for 7-8 hours. There has to be something more that we have been writing for a 2-hour structure. What is it? Well, there are many things, like all the episodes will be divided into acts. Each act of the each section of the act will have the same division, and then each episode will have the definite journey or graph. Well, it can be a little bit tough. It's like suppose you have a toffee, and earlier there were 2 friends, now there are 7 to 8 friends. Divide this toffee properly, and all the pieces should carry the same amount of sweetness and essence when divided, and when all the parts are combined together, it should give more meaning than the sum of it. As soon as the intermission is over, the antagonist comes in full force. This is the time when our protagonist will face its defeat. He or she will understand the might of his or her opponent. He will be caught or thrown out, or at least will meet some kind of a setback for the moment. Who am I kind of a query. Whatever the protagonist has got so far, he will lose it all here, and it is like the beginning of losing your first dime that you have earned so far. It is the time when Vijay is not able to see his mother, who is in the hospital, and he loses Anita and their yet to be born baby as well. You lose it all here. Someone actually dies here, if not physically, then metaphorically. After this, your actor or protagonist is completely broken, as if being beaten to death and thrown into a dark well. But with the help of the mentor or love interest or friend or some incident, the situation helps him or her to collect his or her courage, and he gains strength at his own and goes to the antagonist and do as per the screenplay design. Gabbar Singh will die, but the joke will live on. Let's discuss about screenplay. Now, what is a screenplay? Well, it is a special coded protocol document, like a doctor's prescription or a legal deposition, etc., for the eyes of one who will execute it with understanding. It is an intermediate document which contains the blueprint of the film. It is technically the seed of cinema. Well, you must be wondering why I am saying it is screenplay and why I am not using the word script. At places, you find that script is a generic term for performative actable text, and also including screenplays. Such kind of a statement is slightly skewed, because script is a term which is commonly used in theatre, such as the script of a play, and many a times these actors get into acting films, and with them they bring their own vocabulary. Script is a theatrical term and screenplay is for film. Now, when you talk about screenplay has to create the main plot, the important subplots, and thus the structure of a story. Now, when we talk about structure, we are basically talking about premise, we are talking about character, and we are talking about conflict. Now, what kind of a structure we are talking about? We are actually talking about the classical 3-act structure. So we are talking about setup, confrontation, we are talking about resolution. In simple language, we are actually talking about Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. So let's talk a little bit about Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. It's a basically classical structure which was developed by Aristotle. Now, suppose if you have a 2-hour film, so Act 1 will be first 30 minutes, Act 3 will be last 30 minutes, and Act 2 will be 1 hour in between. So if I put a cross in between, so 1 hour here, 1 hour there, so Act 2 is basically at both the places. So here I have Act 1, here I have Act 3, and this is Act 2, which is like long. So it is like 1 hour here and 1 hour here. So technically Act 1 and Act 2 Part 1 is 1 hour, Act 2 Part 2 and Act 3 is 1 hour. So technically this becomes a 2-hour film. Now in India, as I said, after 1 hour there is a interval kind of a thing or a break kind of a thing. So as we were talking about the beat sheet, Midpoint, which was on page 55, was exactly happening there. So before you let your audience go for an interval, you really have to have something very interesting before the interval is about to happen. Then you relax it after interval, because people will take some time to come in, and some very important element or some very dramatic thing should not take place. It should actually take place after some 4-5 minutes, when you know that your audience must have settled down in seats and things like that. So Ballal Dev will be shouting, where is that bugger, and how come everybody was shouting his name, why my statue was being installed and everybody was talking. So nothing, though obviously it's an important thing, because it is taking the narrative forward, but not like Katappane Bahubali ko kyun mara kind of a thing is happening exactly after interval. Because Katappane Bahubali ko kyun mara, this kind of a thing really needs your attention. So this is a very important thing. So it will, like when you write it, it happens at some other point of time, but nothing so very important, nothing of this magnitude exactly after interval. So you have Act 1, Act 2 and Act 3, and the total duration is basically 2 hours. So basically Act 1 is for 30 minutes, Act 2 is for 1 hour, and Act 3 is for 30 minutes. And interestingly, I read it somewhere that every act is a film in itself. It's a food for it's a food for thought. Do think about it, and the day you can do it, you are writing amazing stories. Now, after this, let's talk about the component of structure. It's a structure, so let's talk about the component of structures. Now the first component is scene. Now it's an event where there is action through conflict, which is almost continuous in time and space. Ideally, every scene is an event. Then you have sequence. It is a series of scenes. Generally, it is 2 to 5 in number, where the culmination happens. It is a series of scenes. It ends with greater impact than the last scene. Act. What is an act? Every act has a high point, which is the beginning point of the next act. Now when we talk about event, it is between shot and scene. It can be bigger than a shot, but can also be smaller than a scene. It is basically those small turns and twists which can actually change the track of your story. In cinema, even a shot has a beat, or we may say a rhythm. Every event has a specific beat with which it is operated and helps the event to take its desired shape. Story climax. Every story in this world has a climax. It can be obvious or hidden. A story is a succession of events that invigorate the climax, and it initiates the immutable change. Then you have resolution. It is basically post-climax kind of a thing. It helps generate a sense of normality, and it's also called denouement. Now let's see how a screenplay page looks like. It will also give you an idea in what way a screenplay is written. So what you are seeing on your screen are 2 pages of a screenplay, all that we just discussed, like scene heading, action, character, dialogue, parenthetical, etc., are used here. Let's understand it. Now, what you see on the screen is basically the format of a screenplay. This is how a screenplay is written, and all the things that you see on your left and on the right side of the screenplay is basically they are explaining what that particular point is all about. Now, before we start understanding this screenplay format, let me tell you something very interesting, that every medium, okay, be that radio, be that documentary, be that screenplay, be that ad, be that comics, or be that book, or any medium with which this writing thing is involved, they have a fixed pattern or a format in which they prefer to write. So all these kind of things have got their format. So what you are looking at right now on the screen is a screenplay format. In the next video, we will see the documentary format. So suppose this is a comics that I have. So it is also written in a different kind of a format. It has got its own format. So be that ad, be that documentary, film, or even serial. We will discuss the format, how serials are written in video number 14. So now when you look at it, it has fade in. So fade in, fade out, dissolve and wipe. This is something we learned in the editing video. And then so this is basically so you slowly fade in, and you want your audience to gradually enter in the world that you have created for them. So this is what it is, and then you can, at the end, you can fade out also. So slowly you are moving away from the world that has been left behind. So this is the effect. Then you have a scene heading, if you can see, and interestingly, ext is exterior, int is interior. So this is what is written first. And interestingly, if you see exterior, writer's store, day. So all this is written in caps. So ext dot writer's store, so that becomes the location, dash day, so that becomes the time. If you remember scheduling, in scheduling, this is what is counted, how the screenplay is written, and this is the way it should be written. So I fade in, it's daytime for me, it's exterior, and the place is writer's store. From this we dissolve to, from exterior, now we dissolve to int. Again, int is interior. So interior of what? Interior of writer's store. So earlier it was exterior of writer's store, day. Now we are dissolving to interior of writer's store. So fade in becomes the first thing, it's an effect. Then you have this thing, in the heart of West Los Angeles, a boutique shop's large open sign glows like a beacon. It's action. So action is basically what is you are going to see, not this action, but what you are going to see on screen. So that becomes action. So basically it's the narrative description of the event of a scene. Then you have transition, which is basically dissolved to. So this is another important thing, that you put your characters. Here it is Anthony, he can be Ram, Shyam, Mohan, Javed, or Usman, but whenever these names come, they are basically in caps. Then after that you write dialogue in between. Now OS is off screen. Now you write OS when you are not in the camera view. Now on this OS thing, if you go slightly up where do you have Chinatown in stock over phone, so this over phone is written parenthetical. So basically it is basically action or attitude direction for a character. Suppose if I am talking to you and I do like this, sigh. So this will become the parenthetical. So this is basically action or attitude direction for a particular character. So if I supposed to do, so this will be written like this only in bracket. So that will become parenthetical. Then OS is become extension, a note placed after the character's name to indicate how the voice will be heard on screen. Okay, how the voice will be heard on screen. Then in the same row you have page number. It is always advisable to put page number on top right. They have given the measurement also, so it is top right. So when you are looking at it, you don't have to look down like this. You are just, you know what page number you are dealing with. So it is always top right. Then when you come to this side, after subheader we have two arrows like this. So it says more and CON''D. Now so when you write more, obviously the dialogue is in continuation and moving to the next page, and it is continued. So you write like this. So use mores and continueds between pages to indicate the same character is still speaking. Then in the last it is written intercut. So intercut for a series of quick cuts between two scene locations. So it depends. Look, all these things, parenthetical, extension, subheader, or action, or effects, or scene heading, there is a rule for it. Like if I am in my room right now, so I have to put a scene heading for it, that I am in interior Salim Javed's room, day, kind of a thing. Then what I am doing will become my action. And then if I am saying something, so Salim Javed in caps in between, and whatever I am saying is basically becomes the dialogue. So I am there. So I am saying something, then you will say something. And if you are saying something and you are at a different location, so there will be an intercut. Or if you are with me, sitting beside me, so we are cutting between me and you. So this will go like this, but location will remain the same if you are at my place. So in this video we understood what is a story, why they are important, what is a plot, how stories can be short, long, or of any length, what are the ingredients of story, why there is a conflict in the story, why there is a motivation in the story. We also learned about the screenplay format. In video 14, where we will discuss about short film writing and television serial writing, there we will also discuss about topics like structure of a story, the turning point of a story, different types of characters, and about the punchline. And I hope that the information provided in this video will come handy whenever you need it, and this video must have solved many of your doubts. I look forward seeing you in the next video. Till then, take care and stay safe.